Jay got to go. But anyway, okay. When we look at our lives and we talk about how did we get to this point in our lives right now, and I think it had to go through a process of healing and forgiveness. And I don't think without a doubt, because a lot of times what happens, if you continue to carry that burden of not forgiving somebody, or that burden of looking at that person and placing all the blame on that individual, that's what takes so much energy from us. It takes so much positive energy from us to continue to live in that negative space. And so when I was thinking about things and looking at how we got to this point where we are right now, there was tons of differences that we had up until this point, but there was tons of agreements too. And so I think that balance comes without, saying that that I don't look to you for strength, because when it comes to our kids, we do. I look to you and guidance, even still to this day with our kids now, we talk about it. How's this one doing in college? How's that one doing on the job? How's that one doing in the military? And we go down the whole list of things, and then we always come back to that point. We would not be here if we did not structure our lives in a way to forgive. And that's what the problem is with so many people. They so non-forgiving. They have these hearts that they look at, and they can always sit there and they can point the finger at somebody else, and they don't forgive. We went through that stage. Hey, I look at you and I cast all the blame on you, not looking at myself. But what people fail to do, and I sit up on my soapbox and I will say this to the day I die, you got to take accountability for what you do and what you bring into the relationship. And if you can't take accountability for that, shame on you. And shame on that. They fooled me one time, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me 3 times. That's an issue. That's a problem. It's deceptive at that time or at that point. But what people will not do is they won't look at themselves.
Right.
They fail to do that. They look at and because it's the easy way out. Look at you and it's all you.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
That's easy for me to say that. The hard
Absolutely.
look is to me to take a look at myself. And that's what I always told you. I will take accountability for my actions. That's one of the first things we taught within the NCO creed. I will take accountability for those actions that I will take.
Right.
And and I live by that. If you don't live by that, you got an issue or a problem, and you got to forgive. You look at God, and God forgives us so many times each and every day. Am I right?
Right. Absolutely. I mean,
but we don't have the power to forgive each other.
Right.
We always want to bring up the negative, but we can never bring up anything positive.
And you said something about forgiveness and looking at ourselves, and I think that goes hand in hand. And I think that for me, things that I remember specifically is that transitioning stage of after 2010. Right. And so for me, I looked at it and said, what did I do, or what could I have done differently? Right. And so that put me on a journey of.
Do you remember what I said to you though? Within that process, you said, hey, and we've had this conversation within it. I said it was nothing about you. It was all about me and my greed and selfishness and how I looked at life and what I was doing. Now, did you have some faults? Absolutely.
Yeah, but here's the thing though. When it came to me and my journey of forgiveness, right, I held myself like I never do this 50-50 blame about when it came to the relationship crumbling. I do I'm 100% responsible for it.
For your actions. Right.
I am 100%.
That's right.
Right. That's how I feel it, because in my mind, even because I think the person and I'm so glad that my brother is my North Star, because even when he would tell me things and I would say things, I'm like, well, why is it that I'm seeing them do these things now and they didn't do these things for me? And he told me you didn't give them the space to do that, right?
The growth process.
And so I didn't know that certain people had to have certain like privileges, or not privileges, that's the wrong word. I didn't know that certain people needed permission to do certain things, because I thought people would just be who they are and that's it, right? But then also that's part of growth, right? Because when you are in a relationship with somebody, you take things with them. Right. So you may not have been that person in the relationship, because I was that person, but then you were able to grow from that, which made, maybe you saw some things that you did need to implement. I don't know. But what I do know is that I also never gave you the I never had to fall and faint, right? I never did that. And I don't know if that was what was required for us in our relationship, but I never did that. It was always, and I think how I really understood that was with the oldest boy. Because, when I talked to him about certain things that happened, even in my first marriage, it is hard for him to fathom those things because in his mind, my mother would never be that person that allowed those things, right? And you know the things I'm talking about.
Right, exactly.
And so he can't fathom that because he only knows me as this, although he was there and present, he was too young to remember. He can't fathom it because he only knows me as being this woman that's fierce, that's fearless and fierce and, all these things, right? And tough and kicking down doors and stuff, right? And was a drill sergeant in the Army.
Right.
So he can't see those things for me, right? But then I also, but part of me going through my part of forgiveness is that I had to own those things. I had to own those things that I wasn't like, I guess it was like, I didn't communicate those things and maybe I didn't have the words. Maybe I was too young, but I didn't understand how to tell you, I got to fight battles in the streets. I got to be this woman in the streets. When I come home, I want to rest in my femininity. Back then we didn't use words like that.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
I couldn't tell you what I needed. Right. And so I had to, and it's a shame that we couldn't stick around to see the better parts of each other. But it's just one of those things where I had to forgive myself and I had to forgive the relationship or forgive that younger version of both of us.
Yeah. And that's what it's about.
Yeah.
How do I forgive myself first? And you gotta ask God that question. I look at faith and I do believe faith is that way. You gotta ask God, but faith without works is what? Null and void. It doesn't happen. So if I'm asking God that question, that means I'm willing to take a deep look at myself within that. I'm not willing to point the finger at anybody and hold anybody accountable for the things in my actions, what I did within the relationship.
Right.
And that's what's important. When we sit here and we talk about these things and how do we forgive, first thing is this: forgive yourself, because you're not without blame. The second thing is this: now you got to work on how you can concentrate in your mind that quick pro quo that you think happened to you. You know what I'm saying? It was this for that, or tit for tat, if you want to talk about it. And so when you look at it, and we got to sit there and say, hey, this is what it is. I get on my knees and I pray, and I'm not perfect. But guess what? That individual that you hold in this such disdain for and hatred for is not perfect either. So you got to get into that mindset. Hey, how I forgive. How do I forgive that? It's first by sitting there saying, hey, I take accountability for what I did. And I ask God to forgive me.
Right.
But folks, they so easy to hold these grudges, and they will hold grudges for 50, 60, 70 years. For what?
And it's and that comes with, like I said, growth. It comes with, and I think that's how we are able to sit here now, even after 15 years post-divorce.
15 years post-divorce.
And through those 15 years, we had our hiccups. We had some of them. But it was never anything that was so tumultuous that...
Shoot, it was one.
Really? I don't remember. We'll talk about it later.
You don't remember? Man, boy, that was one.
I mean, and early on, like when we first divorced.
No, man.
Like 2010, 2011, or 2012, but I don't remember anything after that.
No, that was one. That was one incident that it kind of ripped me in half because of our son. And, we talked about that and we discussed that in one of the previous episodes when you decided you wanted to bring him back home. And that was one that was like, I was just done. I was done at that point.
I don't remember that one. I mean, when you say bring my son back home, I don't remember that one.
Remember, he came to stay with me. You let him come stay with me for a couple of years, and then all of a sudden you said, I'm taking him back.
No, it was so...
And it was and I asked you why you did that, and it took a lot for me to get over that hump. We were okay. We're getting off subject, but I'm just saying there was one.
Okay,
because
and it wasn't. It was sixth grade repeated, seventh grade that he had to stay with you. He had to repeat sixth grade,
and he came back for
seventh grade, and he did half of eighth grade or something like that with me.
Ninth grade. Eighth and the half of the eighth and then ninth. But go ahead.
Ninth grade is high school, so it's here. It was here in Thomasdale.
Let's stay focused.
So he was in Virginia by this time. So anyway,
But that was one. That was just one for me.
But anyway, I say all that because coming forward, but then
Let me ask you a question. How did you forgive yourself within the process? What steps did you take to sit there and say, hey, these are the steps I took to get better within myself?
okay, so
before
I'm going to put it all out there for you because I need you to understand this.
Okay.
When I walked away from the marriage, I had to figure out because let me tell you something, what I did not want to do was walk away and feel the same way I felt in my first marriage, which was, and I'm being like, when I tell you, you and I've never had this conversation, this is me and how I had to walk that path of understanding and forgiveness. When I remember when my first husband and I divorced, or we split up, when we initially split up,
Right.
it was one of those things where the next day, because I was in Europe, and it was like, well, was I even married? Was I even ever? So it was always this thing with me because I was like so disconnected so fast, right? So when you and I divorced on August the 2nd of that year,
Right.
that was one of the things that feared me. Would I wake up that day and be like, was I even married?
Right.
And I woke up that day and was like, was I even married? Because it was something that I knew that it must not be, it wasn't meant to be. Because if it was meant to be, it would have been.
Right. Absolutely.
Right. And I felt that. I felt that way because, I felt that way. I remember feeling that way. I remember feeling that. And I remember feeling, this is how I felt. And when we talk about forgiveness, this is how I knew I had deeper issues. So I remember thinking to myself during that time, because I remember the person I called, a female on the phone. We know the Sergeant Major. And I was like, today my divorce is final. And I was like, why don't I feel something? Right? Why don't I feel? And I didn't feel something, right? I didn't feel something because in my mind, you didn't fight for us. So because you had 6 months, like I had 6 months to say we didn't want to do this. So because you didn't fight for us, it took me back to myself as a child, which means that, hey, if you're not going to fight for me, then that means that I put myself in a position where I wasn't supposed to be there anyway. And that's how I looked at it.
Okay.
And the same, and so I took that from what I learned as a child, from not having my father around, or even the relationship that I had with my mother, and me being the oldest child and growing up with her. But the way I saw it is, if I'm not worthy you choosing me and fighting for me, then I put myself in that position. And if I put myself in that position, then what is it that I got to work on for myself?
Right.
So from that point on, I had to go through a journey. Right. And so that's why, for me, it was like I said, Yashika, what is it about you? Because you shouldn't walk away from a marriage of any sort, a relationship of any sort, and not feel anything. Because it's like I didn't feel what I thought I needed to feel. Like I recall times in a relationship where there were things that I would do, and I would say, I'm going to act crazy because I think I'm supposed to act like this. In other words, I'm supposed to do this. Like, because it's like instinctively, it was like, whatever, I ain't got time for that. But I was like, nah, because the women in the stories, when they find out they doing this, they act crazy. I'm going to do this too. It was like I was supposed to do those things. It was like I was supposed to, because that's how you're going to know I care. Right? Because if I don't do those things, then you don't know that, because I'm not, because it's like, but do I need to show that? So in my mind, I wasn't being what you needed. Therefore, I had chose to put myself in that position, and I needed to figure out what healing I needed to do.
Right.
So through that process, I had to go back and say, you know what? You cannot, I was a child, right? I was a child, meaning that when you and I started dating, I was coming out of a marriage, right? That I had been in when I was 18, a child, that I met him when I was 17, a child. So I had to understand like that woman of Yashika as opposed to that child and that teenager, because although I had grown-up responsibilities very early, mentally, maybe I wasn't as mature as I needed to be, because you cannot force somebody. So that's something that I had to forgive myself for. I even found myself doing that in friendships with my female friends. I had a female friend, and I'm going to say this before I had a female friend that I remember when her and I became friends many years ago. I told her, hey, you're the only black woman in this school with me, meaning that when we worked at, so we're going to be friends, because what we're not going to do is make these people think that two black women can't get along.
Right.
And so moving forward, she would always remind me of that. Well, you made me be your friend. And so when there were things that she was doing in our friendship that let me know that she didn't really want to be my friend, I had to think about that. Let me forgive me for holding you hostage and trying to be my friend. You were never my friend.
Right.
You told me that. Right. And that's how I feel about anything else.
Right.
Right. When it comes to things like that.
I don't think you should ever feel that way about your marriage, because when we did in August came about, it was a setback, because nobody goes into a situation thinking this is what the end state would be. If I married you, I want to be married to you to the end, and we work it out and we figure it out. But when you got to that point and you looked at yourself, how did you address any of that for yourself?
I had to get to a point in my understanding of saying I'm only going to be in spaces around people that either one, I choose to be there, or they choose me.
And we had never had these conversations
Correct.
before.
Right. In other words, I'm not going to be an option for anybody.
Right.
Whether it's my man or one of my friend girls, or whether it's my family member. You're going to choose me or you're not. It's not going to be like, well, maybe I'll take her if. No. You're either with me or you're not. And so I had to get to that place for myself. Like, in other words, I can't, because I see people for who they are meant to be.
Right, right.
So when I look at people, I'm like, oh my God, you're amazing. I like you. Whether you're my, whoever. But they're looking at me like you're weird, get away. Right. And I'm like, no, I'm not weird. Be my friend. Listen, I had to get to that point with me, my understanding with me. So that took me to forgive that child of Yashika that wanted to be accepted by others.
Question for you. So do you think in your mind the things you went through previously as a child?
Well, all of it is a step. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
As a teenager, as a wife to your first marriage, and then our marriage, those things, do you think they impacted you because maybe that you never dealt with all the issues beforehand?
Okay, so here's the thing. When you meet a person,
right,
they're not, when you're adult. Okay, no, that's not what I was gonna say. When you meet a person that is not a minute old in this world, and you meet a person, let's just say that's 20, 22, right? They're not fresh out the box. In other words, they have 22 years of something.
Right.
Everybody does, or 20 years of something. They're not. You didn't just unwrap them out the box and say, "This is my wife. She's brand new to earth," or "This is my husband. He's brand new to earth."
Right, right.
I don't care if you was running when you was a kid and you sprained your knee and got a splinter. Had to get stitches. That's part of your life. Like, I remember, that's why I got this scar right here.
Right.
Or you got bit by a dog. You remember those things.
Right.
So in other words, nobody is new out the box. In order for you to have been attracted to Yashika that you was attracted to in the 90s, I had to have been through the things I was been through.
Right.
Had I been anything different, we wouldn't have had this.
But been through those things.
Being through those things is how it's helped me to see past the BS that you presented.
Okay, got it. So seeing the BS that I presented, but had you dealt with the things that you needed to deal with? It had
nothing to see.
No. I'm asking a question.
But that's the thing about it. There was nothing there that I was not aware of. Everything that I had been through, even to this now, sitting here at 52, I am aware of what I went through, why it happened, and the reason why it happened, whether there's a good or bad or indifferent. Everything from the day I was born, March 1973 to now, was for me to sit here in this seat and be who I am. And I have had more great things to happen to me than bad things. Okay. So when it comes to the bad things, right? Some of those things, listen, those bad things that happened were nothing compared to other people. And that's how I see my life.
Okay, so I get that. So when you look at yourself and your trajectory of your process of going, not trajectory, but your process of getting to the forgiving stage, you had been through enough things to see that you had to forgive things in the past to get to where you were now. And so getting to this stage, you still had some heartache with it and heartburn, but guess what? You figured out a way to forgive.
Absolutely, because I had to recognize that I can't go back and change anything. I always say, even like, for example, I retired from the military at 43 after serving 25 years, right?
Right.
And I think about this. One of the things that you know about me is that my father and his father and my father's two brothers, they all went to the military. Okay. So that means that all the men in my paternal family went to the military, because I have a grandfather, I have my father, he had two younger brothers. They all went to the military. I'm the oldest grandchild on that side, but I'm a girl. I'm
Right.
the only one that went to the military and retired. Everybody else was put out or whatever happened. My grandfather died before he could get that far. And then my father and his brothers, they were literally put out the army for disciplinary actions. And so I say this to you because it's like one of those things where when I look at that in terms of me as a woman and me and what I'm doing and things like that, it's like, this is part of,
Right.
it's like, it's part of life. Like if I had been raised with my father, when I talk about, that's what it was. When I talk about tragedies, had I been raised with my father, I probably would not have stayed in the military. Because here's the thing, I probably would never join, because he probably had a misconception about the military. Think
Right.
about it. If his father and his two brothers and himself didn't make it to the end,
Right.
if he had been in my life, he probably would have told me what? You shouldn't do that.
shouldn't do that.
You shouldn't. That's a white man's army or whatever,
Right.
whatever.
Right.
Right. And so I probably.
Those are the things he dealt with.
And
at that
those
time.
were
Yeah,
things
Vietnam and all
that
stuff. Yeah.
they talked
Right,
about a lot,
right,
especially in that
right.
generation, because they seen so much, especially
Right.
Vietnam.
Right.
And so I say that because so I think about those things. So had my father been there, would I have done that? And I'm not saying that my life would have been worse, but I do know that being retired at 43 is a plus, right? So I look at those things. So some of those things happened the way they were supposed to happen, because I remember as a kid saying that I'm going to go into the military because why? I wanted to be able to get to a point where I get a check for the rest of my life, but then I can go off and do what I want to do.
Right,
Which
right.
is what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, you're enjoying. You're living your
Yeah,
best
no,
life.
and not just that, but
Right.
just me being able to be the entrepreneur I want to be,
Right.
and not have to worry about my overhead.
Right.
And so I remember deciding this at 12 years old.
Right.
Right. And so I say that to you because of that. So in other words, all the things that happened to me in my past, or things that I had to go through as a child, I mean, they weren't all bad.
Understood.
Those bad things
Understood.
helped shape me, because I don't know anybody that can say, you know what, I can't recall a bad thing that ever happened in my life. Like I can't recall I don't know anybody.
There's not any.
Because even like whether it's you're watching a ancestor die or whatever, like that's tragic for people. Like people process things differently.
Right.
And so for me, I'm just glad that I was able to process certain things, because I'm gonna tell you something. Me having two divorces back to back, and what I mean by two divorces back to back is because you guys were married, I was married to you guys back to back. I had to do soul surgery because in my mind, I was the problem, right?
Okay.
Because regardless of what you guys did, right? Because honestly, I divorced for both things. If you think about the divorce, they both align with what was in the Bible. You should not be with anybody that committed adultery, and you should be with anybody that abused you. It says it in the Bible. So legit, my divorces were legit, okay? However, at the same time, the second divorce isn't the reason why I divorced out of the Bible. It's just that simple. However, it aligns up. But for me, I had to look at myself, okay, here I am going into my 40s, I'm divorced. What do I need to do for myself, right? And like I said, the younger Yashika, there was never part of anything that I did in anything where I was being vindictive, or it was something where I didn't want the best. And that's why when I got to the point of healing and forgiving, and I sat there with myself for those years after the divorce, I can honestly say that everything I did in that marriage, regardless, I knew that I was doing it for the better good of us. In other words, the bigger picture.
So,
The bigger picture. Like, in other words, if I was very stern, or if I kept our kids structured,
Right.
or if I kept our kids saying, hey, school is important, or if I say, hey, we're going to be a family and sit down for Sunday dinner, we're going to go to church, we're going to go on vacation. These are things that I provided structure for, right? Regardless of anything else, because no one's perfect. And so when I looked at the things that I was able to do without me understanding, because I was only 27 when I married
Right.
you. So for me not having any of those things, I was able to forgive myself in a lot of ways, because I knew that I was working with what I had, which was very little education about anything of being a wife.
Right. And taking that into my mindset is that you just really, that burden of not forgiving people and riding with that in your life, man, it's so draining because you're living in that moment constantly, and living in that moment constantly
It's a lot.
it's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. So you got to get out of that moment so you can move on and be great for who you might. It could be just for yourself,
That's it.
or for your relationship with God, or your relationship with somebody else. But you got to let that go so you can getting on with your life. If one guy said, I was in counseling, and I go to counseling. He said, Jerry, if you keep on looking in that rearview mirror, you can never see what's going forward. And I kept looking in the rearview mirror in my life and the things that hindered me as a child all the way up until now. Your growth process is not on anybody else's clock.
Nope.
And that's what people don't realize. When I became what I thought I should have become as a man, it was on my time. It wasn't like Charles told you. He said, like your brother said, it ain't on your time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
See, it ain't on your time.
Absolutely.
And people get better within their lives in their time. But you got, once again, it goes back to your relationship, what you develop in a spiritual sense. Because that's real. We go out here and we talk about everything else. We talk about me, 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 me. No, there's no me without God, period. And I'm not trying to, but the spiritual sense of it is everything. It's everything. Because
everything.
when you can sit down and you got to spend some time by yourself, woo.
And I think that's where a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
They don't spend time by themselves because what people don't and this is part of the forgiveness process. And I know for me, I had to go through that stage of life where I'm like, because it's energy, right? And it's energy. And I remember in the beginning when you and I first divorced, I remember like trying to like just put a Band-Aid on some things and going about life. But then I realized that was not what I was doing. Right. And what I mean by Band-Aid is, let me just because I got these things to worry about because, like I said, a few years after you and I divorced, I ended up getting my daughter. And then I still had the boys, I still had my mom. So I still had things to do. I didn't have time to really settle into my thing, right? Settle into or think about what was missing out of my life. That's why I tell people, even in COVID was amazing for me. People say COVID like maybe from a financial standpoint, but when it came to me really sitting with myself, COVID was amazing to me. And I remember in 2020, because I had just celebrated my birthday before we went into COVID. And I had just turned 47. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm 47. I've been divorced now for about almost 10 years, whatever. And so I just remember thinking to myself, now what, right? And right after that, we went into COVID. And that was that moment where I could no longer run from anything because I was in the house. I didn't have any visitors, you know what I mean? And I mean, life was lifing. And I had my daughter. And so, I mean, that's when I had to really dig deep. I saw so many things in my life that I wanted to improve on. And I think one of the things that I did recognize at that point was the things that I did in my marriages. And I think that me being the woman that I am, I think that was something that I also took with me. And I recognized that, you know what? I'm okay. Right? And so my third husband will be somebody that says, you know what? I accept you just the way you are.
So as you start to move forward and you look back at yourself, what is something that you think in your mind that you could change about yourself?
What do I need to change about myself?
No, I'm talking about what you would have done differently back then.
What I would have done differently back then? Honestly, what I would have did different back then is that I wouldn't have dated you until you were divorced. Okay. And I wouldn't until I was divorced. If we were to date in any kind of way,
clean slate, right?
It should have been a clean slate because at that point we were bringing, whether it was bad, good, or indifferent, we were bringing over stuff from our last relationships in that relationship.
Right.
And and if you wanted to be with me, or if I wanted to be with you, we should have waited until we closed those doors on those things and then move forward.
I agree.
You know what I mean? Totally. And so if I had to do all over again, that's what I would have done.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah.